Knew you were doing great, thanks. Hey, I'm going to put you on mute until we are ready to get started, but we're just gathering as we speak, and we're going to kick off the meeting, and then I'll bring you back on.
Sure thing.
Okay, so you're going to just hear silence for a few minutes.
Okay.
Silence is golden. Hi, Dee. This is Brad Blake, La Plata County Commissioner. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, thanks. It's a little frosty down here. About zero, but you know we'll live with it. We'd like to go ahead and get started. We're missing. Nope, she's here. Good. Gwen, or our other county commissioner, came in. We'll go ahead with introductions. My name is Brad Blake, County Commissioner.
Joe Kirby, La Plata County Manager.
Cheryl Rogers, County Attorney.
Julie Westendorf, County Commissioner.
Gwen Lackolt, County Commissioner.
Diane Sorensen, County Finance Director.
We have several people also in the audience, so we'll go ahead and introduce them.
Sherry Dugdale, Assistant to the City Manager for Durango. Melissa Youssef, County City Resident.
All right, thank you very much. I will go ahead and turn things over to Joe.
Good morning, everyone. Commissioners, we have just a little less than 30 minutes scheduled with Dee Wisor. The purpose of this conference call is for Dee to provide his insight and guidance as it relates to potential ballot issues. There's been a number of concepts that have been floated over the last couple of months whereby folks have thought about combining possibly two separate items on the same ballot question. For example, the airport and road and bridge. There's also another effort underway called the Decade of Progress that also is looking at having numerous items on one ballot question. And so I wanted to make sure we understood what Tabor says about that and how you can or cannot do that before any of those conversations were to gain much momentum. So Dee, with that, if you would like to just jump in and share your insight that you have relative to those topics.
Well, thank you, Joe. Good morning, everyone. As Joe may have told you, I'm a lawyer with the firm of Butler Snow in the Denver office, and I've been advising local governments on financing options since about 1977. The real question here is really not so much directly a Tabor question, but it even goes back further in time than that. The Colorado Supreme Court decided a case in... Yes?
Could you say the question? Could you specify what the question is?
Yes. So the question, at least as I understand it, is whether in one debt question you could combine unrelated purposes. Or maybe to say that in a more positive way, what purposes could be set forth in a single debt question. And so since statehood, counties and other local governments have been subject to a constitutional provision that required debt to be voter approved, so long before Tabor's requirements. And in 1900, the Colorado Supreme Court decided a case where the city and county of Denver had tried to ask the voters in Denver to approve the issuance of general obligation bonds for a variety of purposes. And the Colorado Supreme Court said in that case, and has repeated in a couple of cases since, that where the Constitution grants voters the right to vote on the issuance of debt, they should have that right determined independently and shouldn't be log rolled to supporting one measure, a variety of measures that they might not support to get the one that they do. And in the case 1900, Denver had proposed 11 different purposes in the one debt question. It included sewers and parks and water and a public auditorium, and the court was troubled by that, and has continued to be in later cases. So really the question is, are the purposes that you might put into a single debt question naturally related one to the other? Is there some connection between purposes? And if any of you have either lived in Denver recently or followed Denver news, the last Denver general obligation bond election in, I think, 2012, Denver submitted a variety of questions to their voters, and then ran a campaign, or more precisely, the Citizens Committee ran a campaign urging people to vote for all of them, but frankly, people had the independent right to vote up or down on each separate purpose. Now, in Denver's case, they all passed in the last election cycle, where they had a debt question like that on the ballot. So, Joe, maybe I should stop there and see if people have questions about that. I want to get into specifics.
Dee, I have a question. This is Gwen Lackold. Was that for a sales tax increase, property tax increase? How did they fund those different initiatives?
In both the 1900 Supreme Court case and then in this last Denver election, they were general obligation bonds payable from property taxes.
Okay.
Dee, this is Julie Westendorf. I have a question as well. You've talked about debt. Debt may or may not be part of the picture we're talking about. We may, for instance, for our road and bridge mill levy increase we asked for, that was not for debt. That was for monies, that was for annual income basically to deal with projects. So I guess the debt question is one of them, but the airport is a debt issue, but not all of them are debt issues. So what about combining, let's say, it's clear on the debt side, what about on non-debt and the ability to combine issues? Tabor kick in there for single issue purposes?
A very good question, and in fact, this may be a circumstance where Tabor is of some benefit to the county. Tabor has a provision that says that you can consolidate various things into a single ballot issue with two exceptions. You can't consolidate things into a debt question, nor can you consolidate things into something that the voters have brought forward by petition. And so if for example, the county wanted to pursue an increase in the sales tax, I think it could be that there could be a variety of purposes for which the sales tax is designated and used, and that would be fine so long as we're not talking about a debt question.
So let me just take a hypothetical. This is not within any of the conversations we're having, because so far the county's really only talked about road and bridge and then the airport, and those two issues have been kept separate in the conversations and in terms of resolving financial issues related to each of them. But if are you saying that they can be so unrelated as, say, the county could ask for a tax increase to cover roads and bridges, and also, I don't know, the fairgrounds, totally unrelated, but that would be okay?
Yes, I think so. Again, as long as we're talking about a tax increase and not a debt increase. And in fact, for the most part, there is no legal requirement in the context of a tax increase that it be designated to a particular purpose. And so if it were politically palatable, the county could ask for an increase in the sales tax by a rate of 1% to fund county purposes. I get that politically people may want more accountability than that, but that would be legally permissible.
Is there a statutory definition of related?
No, it's really more driven by the case law, and so you've mentioned a couple of times Road and Bridge and the airport, and I'd want to go back and look, but there is a Colorado Supreme Court case involving the state of Colorado, whereas, as you probably know, the Colorado Constitution designates certain excise taxes derived from motor vehicles to be used for transportation purposes, and there is a Supreme Court case that, as I recall it, says that building a runway fits into that constitutional limitation, and so it's not just roads and bridges, but could be broader than that. So I think about that a little bit, but it seems, again, if you're talking about a debt question for transportation purposes writ large, that may be appropriate.
Okay, thank you.
Right, got it. One, I hope maybe last question here, Dee. This is Julie Westendorf again. Has to do with, and I think I know the answer, but I'd still rather ask you straight up. So we have multiple taxing jurisdictions. We have La Plata County. We have the city of Durango. We also have school districts and fire districts. My assumption is when you're talking about different taxing districts, you can't combine between taxing districts. The county couldn't have a countywide vote on a taxing issue that relates to a school district, right? I mean, those would have to be separate issues that would have to be advocated by the Citizens Committee or whatever.
So in the interest of full disclosure here, we also work for the school district and for the city. I can't remember if we represent any fire districts, but I just want you to realize that. So I think, Julie, if you're asking the question, could La Plata County ask a question for the benefit of the school district? Is that your question?
You know, that it kind of is.
On
It's
behalf of-
it's really for the purposes of, in my mind, it has to do with if there is a community-wide idea of moving several things forward. I guess I just want to, clarify that the county can't move tax measures forward for the school district. The school district is going to have to move their own tax stuff forward, their own ideas, it will only cover the school district itself. It's not something that the county could pass a tax for the benefit of the school district.
Right. I think that's right, Julie. I mean, and some part of that turns on statutory authority, and at least I think Joe and Cheryl may remember that years ago, folks put into place counties tried to put in place impact fees to benefit the schools in their county, and the Supreme Court eventually decided in a case involving Douglas County that counties didn't have that statutory authority. Now, if there was a statute that passed that said counties can levy a sales tax and share that sales tax with their school district, then I think that would be viable. But I think it really turns mostly on statutory power questions in terms of the county.
Yeah, I mean, we have 3 school districts here, but I mean, theoretically, we could, the county could try to, do a share back or whatever of some kind,
Right.
but that just seems either really complicated or, as you just said, not authorized under state law. So I just
Yeah.
wanted to get that answered sooner rather than have that come back as a question at a later time.
people may say, well, we know of communities where that's going on, but that is true. But where that is going on, at least in my experience, it's been a home rule municipality that is sharing sales tax revenues. So Steamboat's a good example of that. And Joe, I thought maybe Montrose had done that historically. I don't know if that's still true or not.
Actually, I don't believe that's still true.
Okay.
That home rule municipalities cannot pass initiatives.
Now, home rule
on behalf of-
municipalities have much broader authority. For a home rule municipality, basically, they can do anything that the General Assembly could authorize them to do, so long as the Constitution or their charter doesn't prohibit it. And so, like in Steamboat, they passed a citywide sales tax and are sharing it with the school district.
And Commissioner Lyko, what I was referring to is specifically related to Montrose. And Dee, I do know that there have been conversations over the last couple of years between the city of Montrose and Montrose County as it relates to sharing some of that public safety sales tax that the county passed back in 2007 or 2008.
Right.
But I think there's some debate going on there.
Right. But I think maybe to sort of expand this a little bit, I mean, if there was statutory power, then the county could impose a tax for some purpose and share it with any of the governments within the county. And so in some ways the Road and Bridge Fund is a bit of an example there, where, well, of course, there under the law you have to share your property tax back with the municipalities.
Dee, is there anywhere else in the state that you're aware of that has done something similar to the airport/road and bridge transportation concept?
No, there's nothing that comes to mind, Joe. Might be worth a question to CCI to see if they have any information that I don't have, but I can't think of anything along those lines.
Dee, this is Brad Blake. As far as a question regarding a decade of progress, the idea is to have a tax increase for multiple purposes. That would, in talking with you, that would be very hard to do unless it was a sales tax. Am I understanding that correctly?
Well, Brad, I think it's really any tax could be imposed for a broad array of purposes, so long as there's statutory authority for that. And so sales tax is an example, I think, where counties have pretty broad authority in the sales tax arena. And so I think that could work pretty well. Maybe true in the property tax area. I think I'd want to see sort of the list of purposes and think about whether there are any legal restrictions on the county's ability to use it for a particular purpose.
And so, Dee, just to clarify, if that question involved a debt question, however, then it would not be allowed.
That's right, Joe. In terms of the debt question, we'd have to have purposes that are related one to another, or do, as Denver has done, have a package of debt questions, and then hopefully the citizens committee that would be formed around it would campaign for the entire package.
If that ballot question were to come up, each entity, the county and cities, would all have to have their own ballot question?
No, not necessarily. I guess if you're positing, Brad, that could the county have a tax increase question that would be used for fire purposes, let's say. Again, depending upon the county's statutory authority, that revenue could then be shared with other fire protection entities in the county.
Thank you.
One question on that front a little bit is if the idea is you're going to collect taxes at the county level and share it with other levels of government, there is a bit of a Tabor question there. If your government partner wants something beyond an annual appropriation commitment from the commissioners, then Tabor says any multiple fiscal year financial obligation has to be voter approved, and so we'd have to think about how we could do that. But if your government partners are willing to just accept that the commissioners will from time to time appropriate monies in the appropriation process, then we don't have to worry about that.
We have another question. Go ahead.
Sure.
Thank you very much. This is Melissa Youssef, and I just was going to ask you if you could please expand on the 2012 Denver issues that they submitted to the voters. If you could tell me kind of more specific, what they passed together, the citizens.
Yes, in fact, maybe I can pull them up here. Hold on one second. As I recall, they were questions A through I. So that shows you how many there were.
So Dee, while you're looking that up, just to clarify, each one of those was their own separate ballot question, and then the ones that passed, they just totaled those up, and that's the amount of debt that they issued?
Correct. Yes, they had the voters had the right to vote up or down on each separate question, my recollection is they all passed. I thought it was 2012. I think it's actually 2007 now that I'm looking at it. And they had, for example, cultural facilities, health and human services, libraries, parks and recreation, public safety, transportation. It's called the Better Denver Bond Program. So if you want to dig into it, you can just Google that and you'll get some information about it.
Thank you.
And was that 2007 then, Dee?
Yes, 2007.
And that was sales tax, property tax, did you say?
Property tax.
Property. Okay. And do you know the total amount that property taxes were increased?
I don't know the amount the property taxes were increased. I think it was over $500,000 or $500 million in bond issue, though.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Diane, anything?
Diane?
No. Well, I have a question. This is on the finance side rather than the, ballot issue side. My understanding is that if I'm going to talk about the airport specifically, if there were a bond, issuance of debt for the benefit of the airport, we're going to make assumptions about how much revenue would be derived from property taxes related to that, in order to get an idea of what we can finance. So if that revenue were to decline, because we have seen significant decline in revenues and had, say, something been passed in 2010 or 2009, there's a potential that we would have not put in enough mills to cover the debt, because that was kind of heydays for us. So if we were to issue debt and pass a mill levy for the purpose of financing that debt, and then we didn't get enough revenue from the mills, the county would have to make it up to fund the debt service. Is that correct?
Well, really, if what you were thinking about doing is general obligation bonds for the airport, the nature of general obligation bonds in Colorado and really mostly across the country are what are known as unlimited tax bonds. And so the debt question would normally authorize the county to increase the mill levy to whatever rate is necessary to pay the debt service on the bond. So under your question, in fact, the mill levy would go up to generate enough money to pay the debt service. Now, if there were level debt, if the debt service were approximately level in each year and assessed values going down, that means the mill levy has to go up to generate the same dollars, and it might mean that some taxpayers would be paying more than they did before, particularly because I think your circumstance is energy related, that as the oil and gas valuations declined, that would transfer some of the property tax risk to other categories of taxpayers.
Got it, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Cheryl, anything? Gwen? Dee, thank you very much for your time and professional advice. We appreciate it.
You're welcome. Be glad to help. Just let me know.
All right, thank you very much.
Dee, we'll
Bye.
keep you posted. Thanks, and have a good trip.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Dee.
thank you. Have a great day, everybody.
You
Bye-bye.
too.